Serena's life crumbled the moment she gave birth to twins who looked nothing like her or her husband, Isaac Vaughn. Without waiting for an explanation, Isaac accused her of betrayal and vanished, leaving her to struggle alone. Years later, just when Serena rebuilds her life, Isaac returns with a revelation that changes everything. But his secrets run deeper than she ever imagined, and the real shock is yet to come. Stay tuned and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Also, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more captivating stories like this one. Let's begin. To the world, Isaac Vaughn was a visionary, a billionaire businessman, a community leader, and the epitome of power and success. In Atlanta's high society, his name was gold, his reputation untouchable, and his face a symbol of wealth and influence. Beside him stood Serena Vaughn, the perfect wife, the woman who had once been his rock. She was stunning, intelligent, and poised, with a sharp mind that had thrived in the corporate world before she stepped back to support his empire. They were the couple people envied, the embodiment of Black excellence, grace, and dominance. For years, their marriage had seemed unbreakable, and when Serena became pregnant with twins, it felt like the final piece of their picture-perfect life had fallen into place. Isaac had been overjoyed, showering her with affection, throwing extravagant celebrations, and telling the world that his legacy was finally secured. But legacies are fragile things, and the moment their children entered the world, everything fell apart. The delivery room should have been a place of joy, a moment of triumph, the culmination of love and dreams, but instead, it became the stage for a nightmare. The moment the nurses handed Isaac the newborns, his hands trembled, his breathing grew uneven, and his expression hardened into something Serena had never seen before. The babies, his babies, their babies, had blonde hair and pale skin. Isaac froze. The world seemed to stop moving as he stared at them, confusion morphing into shock, then something colder, doubt, suspicion, disgust. His grip on the swaddled infants loosened, his jaw clenched so tightly that Serena thought he might shatter his own teeth. The warmth that had always filled his gaze when he looked at her was gone. Serena was still weak, her body aching from labor, but she sensed the shift before he even spoke. She forced a smile, reaching for his hand. "Isaac, they're beautiful, aren't they?" He didn't respond. He didn't even look at her. His eyes were locked on the babies, his mind spiraling through thoughts she couldn't grasp. Then slowly he turned his head, and when their eyes met, Serena's stomach dropped. "Serena, what is this?" His voice was quiet, controlled, but deadly. A chill raced down her spine. What was he saying? "Our children, they don't look like us." The room went silent. Serena's pulse pounded in her ears, confusion fogging her mind. What was he implying? Her lips parted, but no words came out. Isaac's eyes, which had once held love, now burned with something sinister. "Explain this to me." His tone wasn't that of a husband celebrating his newborns. It was an interrogation. Serena's heart pounded against her ribcage as exhaustion and shock clashed inside her. How could he? Before she could even form a response, he stepped back. He looked at her as if he didn't recognize her, as if she were a stranger, an enemy. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the hospital. He left her there, alone, bleeding, exhausted, shattered, and he never came back. The first blow came with silence. No calls, no texts, no explanation. The man who had once worshipped the ground she walked on had disappeared as if she had never existed. Then came the destruction. Her bank accounts were frozen overnight. Credit cards declined. The lavish penthouse they had shared, the home where they had planned to raise their children, gone. Isaac had cut her off from everything. He had erased her from their life, made sure that everything they had built together was now solely in his name. Serena had never been one to depend entirely on a man, but she had trusted him. They had built a life together, built an empire together. How could he do this? Then the whispers started. Isaac hadn't just abandoned her. He had destroyed her name. Stories began circulating, speculations, rumors. The narrative was carefully controlled, and it all pointed to one thing. Serena Vaughn cheated on her husband. Serena's twins were proof of her betrayal. Isaac Vaughn, the beloved billionaire, had been deceived. Serena was no longer the wife of a billionaire. She was an outcast. The invitations to social events stopped. The doors that were once wide open slammed shut. Friends, people she had trusted, disappeared. She had nothing. Nothing but her children. Serena had once believed that love was enough to weather any storm. Now she knew better. Love? Love was powerless against cruelty. And in the world of the wealthy and ruthless, love was disposable. Serena refused to break. There were nights when she stared at her children, the weight of exhaustion and betrayal crushing her. She could have let it consume her. She could have wept for the life she lost, the love she thought was unshakable. But she didn't, because she had two babies depending on her, two innocent children who didn't deserve the legacy of betrayal their father had left behind. So she fought. She worked double shifts, waitressing in the mornings and cleaning offices at night. She lived in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, barely making rent. She ignored the whispers, the pitiful looks, the judgment. Every sleepless night, every ache in her bones, every rejection, she took it all. Because she was a mother. And mothers don't break. Then, one night, an idea struck her. A way out. An online grocery delivery service for working mothers. A business tailored for women like her, struggling, balancing too much, needing convenience. She launched it from nothing. She worked until dawn, designing the website herself. She knocked on grocery stores' doors, pitching them her vision. She saved every dollar, pouring it into the company, and slowly her business grew. Her name, tarnished by scandal, became a symbol of resilience. Serena Vaughn wasn't just a scorned woman, she was a force. But just as she was rising from the ashes, Isaac Vaughn came back. And this time, he wasn't alone. Serena had spent the last 5 years burying Isaac Vaughn. Not in the literal sense, though sometimes she wished she had. She had erased him from her thoughts, from her dreams, from the world she was building for herself and her children. Every success, every milestone, every breath of freedom had been a step further from the man who had abandoned her at the moment she had needed him most. But ghosts had a way of returning. The night of the twins' 5th birthday should have been perfect. The house was filled with laughter, the scent of buttercream frosting lingered in the air, and a chorus of happy birthday had just ended when the doorbell rang. Serena wiped her hands on a napkin, expecting a late-arriving guest, perhaps a friend who had gotten caught in Atlanta's traffic. She opened the door, and the past stood on her doorstep. Isaac Vaughn. He looked different. Less polished, more human. The arrogance that once sculpted his face was gone, replaced by something she couldn't quite place. Regret? Guilt? Desperation? His expensive suit hung slightly looser than she remembered. The confidence he used to wear like a crown now dimmed in his eyes. Serena's breath caught in her throat, but she refused to show weakness. She had dreamed of this moment, had imagined slamming the door in his face, demanding answers, making him feel even a fraction of the pain she had endured. Instead, she stood frozen, gripping the doorknob until her knuckles turned white. "Serena," he said, his voice quiet, almost hesitant. "We need to talk." A bitter laugh bubbled up in her throat. "Now you want to talk? 5 years, Isaac. 5 years of silence, and you show up on their birthday?" She clenched her jaw, forcing down the wave of emotion rising inside her. What could you possibly have to say that would matter anymore? Isaac exhaled sharply, running a hand down his face, and for the first time he looked nervous. "I was wrong," he admitted. "I was so wrong." Serena didn't invite him in, didn't offer him a drink, didn't allow him a single inch past the threshold. He had given up his right to anything from her the moment he walked out of that hospital. But before she could tell him to leave, he said something that made her world tilt once again. "The twins are mine," he murmured, voice thick with something dangerously close to sorrow. "I know that now." The weight of his words hung between them like an unspoken truth that had always existed but had never been acknowledged. Serena felt her heartbeat in her throat, a mixture of rage and disbelief churning in her chest. "And what gave you that revelation, Isaac? 5 years later? After you left me with nothing? After you let the world rip me apart?" He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. I had genetic testing done. There's a recessive trait in my family. It skipped me, but my biological parents were white, and I never told anyone. I spent my whole life proving I belonged, making sure no one questioned me. And when I saw our kids, I panicked. I thought I was being made a fool of. But I was the fool, Serena. His voice cracked slightly, but Serena felt nothing but cold fury. "You were the fool," she repeated, her voice like ice. "And now what? You think you can just walk back in here, say you're sorry, and everything will be fine? You destroyed me, Isaac. She took a step closer, eyes blazing. You let me suffer. You watched from a distance while I lost everything. And now you want to fix it? Isaac exhaled, shaking his head. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to make things right. I want to be in their lives. I want to be in your life. Serena laughed then, a sharp, bitter sound. You don't get that privilege. You made your choice 5 years ago, and I made mine. I built a life without you. My kids have a home, stability, love. They don't need you, and neither do I. For the first time since he arrived, Isaac looked truly devastated. But Serena didn't care. She had spent too many nights crying over a man who had thrown her away like she was nothing. She wasn't nothing. She was everything. And Isaac Vaughn was no longer a part of that. Serena should have shut the door on him that night. She should have slammed it, locked it, and never looked back. But something held her in place, something she hated to admit. Her children. Isaac wasn't just some man who had hurt her. He was their father, the man they asked about in hushed whispers when they thought she wasn't listening, the man whose absence they felt, even if they didn't fully understand why. She hated that she considered his request, hated that she let him see the twins from a distance, hated that he slowly weaseled his way into their lives again. For the first few months, he played his part well. He took them to the park, showed up to their school events, even offered to help Serena expand her business using his connections. Against her better judgment, she allowed it, and for a brief fleeting moment, she thought maybe, just maybe, he had truly changed, until she discovered the bank transfers. At first, she thought it was a clerical error, a simple mistake. But when she dug deeper, the truth suffocated her like a noose tightening around her throat. Isaac had been siphoning money from her company, redirecting funds into offshore accounts under his name. The man who had abandoned her once was now stealing from her, again. The betrayal was staggering, but nothing could have prepared her for what came next. An anonymous envelope arrived at her office, unmarked and untraceable. Inside was a USB drive. With shaking hands, she inserted it into her laptop, her stomach twisting into knots as she pressed play. Isaac's voice filled the room. Once Serena is out of the picture, the company will be ours. Her blood turned to ice. It wasn't just financial theft. It wasn't just greed. Isaac Vaughn was plotting to take everything from her, again. But this time, he wasn't going to stop at her business. This time, he wanted her gone. Serena sat frozen, staring at the screen, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The voice in the recording belonged to Isaac, but the depth of his betrayal was incomprehensible. He wasn't just stealing from her. He wasn't just trying to regain power. He was planning something far worse. Her hands trembled as she replayed the clip, hoping she had misheard. But no, the words were unmistakable. Once Serena is out of the picture, the company will be ours. A thick silence filled the room. The weight of those words crashed down on her, suffocating. What did he mean? Out of the picture? Had he been planning to ruin her financially, to force her out of her own business? Or was it something darker, something permanent? She swallowed hard, her mind racing. This wasn't just about greed. Isaac wasn't working alone. Someone else was pulling the strings. And then, as if the universe had chosen that moment to confirm her worst fears, her phone buzzed. The number was blocked. With hesitation, she answered, gripping the phone so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Serena Vaughn, a voice on the other end, said smoothly, deep and cold. I was wondering when you'd finally put the pieces together. Serena's stomach twisted into knots. Who is this? A low chuckle. Ah, my dear, you already know. I am the one who has been watching, waiting, the one who has ensured your company thrive just long enough for me to take it. You can call me the architect. Serena's blood ran cold. The architect. The name had been whispered in elite circles, always in hushed tones, always with an air of caution. No one knew who he really was. A faceless puppet master, controlling corporations, dismantling empires, building new ones in their place, and now she was his next target. You see, Serena, the voice continued, Isaac was never really in control. He was merely a pawn, a useful one at first, but he got sloppy, let emotions cloud his judgment. And now, he's disposable. Serena's breath hitched. What do you want from me? The architect responded swiftly. I want what's already mine. Your company, your success, your empire. And if you don't step aside, well, Accidents happen all the time, don't they? Serena's grip on the phone tightened. Fear licked at the edges of her mind, but beneath it, something stronger burned. Rage. She had already been ruined once. Already been discarded like she was nothing. She had fought her way back from nothing, clawed her way to the top through blood, sweat, and relentless determination. And no one, not Isaac, not this so-called architect, not anyone, was going to take that away from her again. Her voice was steady when she spoke. I don't care who you are. You think you can scare me into giving up everything I built? You have no idea who you're dealing with. The architect chuckled again, but there was something in his voice this time. Amusement, but also curiosity. Good, he said. Let's see if you fight as well as you build, Miss Vaughn. Then the line went dead. Serena sat there for a long moment, her hands gripping the desk, her mind swirling with the weight of what she had just uncovered. Isaac was just a tool. The real threat had been hiding in the shadows all along. And if she wanted to survive, she had to strike first. The following morning, Serena walked into her office with a single goal in mind, bringing down the architect before he destroyed her. She called an emergency meeting with her closest advisors, including Detective Jordan Cruz, the only person she trusted in law enforcement. Cruz had been investigating high-level corporate crimes for years, and when Serena laid everything out, the financial discrepancies, the secret recordings, the architect's threats, her face hardened. This is bigger than just you, Serena, Cruz said, flipping through the documents. This syndicate has been operating for years, laundering billions through legitimate businesses. If Isaac was involved, he's not the only one. The question is, how do we expose them without putting you in the crosshairs? Serena squared her shoulders. We lure them out. Cruz raised an eyebrow. That's risky. You're playing with powerful men, the kind who don't leave loose ends. Then we make sure I'm not a loose end, Serena replied. She laid out her plan, a fake merger announcement. If the architect wanted her company, she would make it seem like she was finally willing to hand it over. She would go public with a strategic business deal, appearing as though she was stepping down from her own empire. The goal? Force the architect to reveal himself. Cruz hesitated, then nodded. You're either brilliant or reckless. Maybe both, Serena admitted. But either way, I'm done letting people take from me. The plan was set into motion. Serena held a press conference announcing a potential merger with Vaughn Global Enterprises, the very company Isaac had once controlled before his downfall. The media erupted, speculating on what this meant. Would she finally forgive Isaac? Would she rebuild the empire they had once shared? She let the world believe what it wanted. All that mattered was that the architect was watching. The night of the merger signing arrived. The event was staged at an exclusive private club in Atlanta, filled with journalists, investors, and high-profile business moguls. Serena moved through the crowd with practiced ease, smiling at cameras, shaking hands, playing her role perfectly. But beneath the poised exterior, she was waiting. Watching. And then he appeared, Alexander Pierce, CEO of Vaughn Global Enterprises, the true architect. He approached her with a slow, confident stride, dressed in a sharp black suit, his expression unreadable. Serena's pulse quickened, but she remained steady. This was the man who had tried to erase her, who had controlled Isaac, who had threatened her life. And now, he was standing before her, bold enough to face her in public, knowing full well what he had done. Miss Vaughn, he greeted smoothly. I must say, I'm surprised. I didn't think you would come this far. Serena tilted her head, forcing a smile. And yet, here I am. His eyes flickered with something almost like approval. You've made things difficult for me, but I always get what I want. Serena leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. Not this time. A sudden commotion at the entrance. The doors burst open, and federal agents flooded the room. Cameras flashed, journalists gasped, and within seconds, the once confident Alexander Pierce was surrounded. Detective Cruz stepped forward, flashing her badge. Alexander Pierce, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. Serena exhaled as she watched him stiffen, his jaw locking. This wasn't how he thought the night would go. But then, he turned to her, smiling slightly and whispered, You won the battle, Miss Vaughn. But the war isn't over. She met his gaze, unflinching. Then I guess you'll have plenty of time to plan from a prison cell. Serena had won. Alexander Pierce was in handcuffs, his empire collapsing overnight. Billionaire CEO arrested in corporate crime ring flooded the headlines as Vaughn Global Enterprises crumbled under federal scrutiny. With the syndicate exposed, arrests followed, offshore accounts were frozen, and those who once operated in the shadows had nowhere to hide. Alexander was finished, and Isaac, his final protection vanished with Alexander's fall. Now he was nothing, but Serena had one last loose end. 2 days later, Serena sat across from Isaac Vaughn at the county detention center. His once proud image had been reduced to an orange jumpsuit and shackled hands. "Didn't think you'd come," he muttered. Serena's gaze was steady. "I needed to see it for myself. The man who tried to destroy me, reduced to nothing." Isaac chuckled, shaking his head. "You think you've won? The syndicate runs deeper than Alexander. There are others." She leaned forward. "Then let them come. I've beaten every single person who tried to bury me. I'll do it again." Isaac smirked, but something in his eyes shifted. Bitterness, resignation. "You always did like proving people wrong." Serena stood. "Goodbye, Isaac." For the first time, his smirk faded. He swallowed hard, realizing there were no more moves left for him. She walked out of that prison, with her head held high, knowing she would never see him again. With the syndicate exposed, Serena's company thrived. Investors who once doubted her now scrambled to align with her success. She had won, but victory came with new shadows. Anonymous messages began appearing. "You think this is over? Watch your back." At first, she ignored them, but one night, as she left her office, she felt it, that sharp awareness of being watched. She refused to live in fear, but she wasn't naive. She wasn't going to wait for another attack. She hired a private investigator, dug deeper into Alexander's network, and uncovered what she had suspected. He wasn't the top of the chain. There were still others, but this time, she was striking first. Months later, Serena stood before a packed auditorium, her presence commanding the room. She was no longer just a CEO, she was a force. Success isn't about luck, connections, or wealth. It's about refusing to be erased. When the world tries to take what you've built, you decide your worth. The crowd erupted in applause, but Serena barely heard it. Her children sat in the front row, eyes shining with admiration. They had lived through the storm, but she had made sure they came out stronger. As she stepped off stage, her phone buzzed. "The game isn't over," Serena smirked. "No, it's not, but this time I'm ahead of it." As Serena's journey shows, resilience, determination, and the will to fight back can turn even the darkest betrayals into triumph. What did you think of her story? Did her strength inspire you? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this gripping tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Your support helps us bring you even more captivating content. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.